She was 8 months pregnant when she found the phone that would destroy her world. Her billionaire husband's secrets weren't just about other women. They were stained with blood money and broken lives. The moment she hit send on those screenshots, she signed her own death warrant. But what he didn't know was that her brothers worked for the FBI and Treasury. And they were already building his cage. What would you do if the person you loved most became the monster you feared? Have you ever ignored red flags because you wanted to believe in someone? Have you ever discovered that your entire life was built on lies? Has someone you trusted ever turned into a stranger before your eyes? Vanessa Rodriguez thought she was checking for affair evidence. Instead, she uncovered a 340 million human trafficking network and her husband's role as the money man behind it all. By the time you finish this story, you'll see how one woman's courage dismantled an empire of evil, but at a cost that would break most people. Stay with me through every twist, every betrayal, every moment of justice. This isn't just a story. It's a warning about who we let into our lives. Let me take you back to where it all began, when Vanessa Rodriguez believed her fairy tale was real. She had everything: wealth, love, security, until the night curiosity became a death sentence. Austin's skyline glowed through floor-to-ceiling windows, the penthouse wrapped in glass and steel like a jewelry box. Vanessa stood in the nursery, hands on her swollen belly, tracing constellations they'd painted on the ceiling, maps of a future that felt almost too perfect to be real. 7 years ago, she'd been nobody. The girl from Houston serving cocktails at a tech conference, cleaning up after people who made more in an hour than her parents made in a month. Then Preston Gallagher walked up to the bar. Keynote speaker, self-made billionaire, the kind of man who shouldn't have noticed her. But he did. Their romance happened fast. Private jets to Napa Valley, weekend trips she couldn't pronounce the names of, a wedding on the beach in Malibu with 200 guests she'd never met. For 7 years, she lived in his world. Penthouses and galas, charity events and business dinners where she smiled and stayed quiet. She learned to fit, learned to ignore the voice that whispered she didn't belong. Learned to be grateful instead of suspicious. Now, 8 months pregnant with twin girls, she stood in a nursery that cost more than her parents' house. Grace and Hope. They'd chosen the names together, lying in bed with his hand on her belly, feeling their daughter's kick. Preston came home that evening, smelling like expensive cologne and winter air. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, lips against her neck, hands covering hers on her stomach. "You're beautiful," he murmured against her skin. She leaned back into him, felt his heartbeat against her shoulders, his breath in her hair. This was real. This was hers. The doubt she'd carried for months, the weird phone calls, the locked office, the way he'd started looking at her like she was a problem to solve, melted away. She believed him, believed everything. Have you ever had a moment where everything felt too good to be true? When did you realize you were right to be afraid? Drop a comment below. But that night, when Preston's phone buzzed on the nightstand, and he grabbed it with a speed that made her heart skip, Vanessa saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Panic. And panic, she'd learn, was just the beginning. The signs were there for months. She just didn't want to see them. Rain hammered the windows as Preston paced their bedroom at 2 a.m., voice low on his phone, words she couldn't quite catch. When she asked who called, his smile was quick, too quick. Just Tokyo, time zones. But Tokyo didn't explain the fear threading through his voice. It started 6 months ago. Late-night calls he'd take in his office with the door locked. Cash withdrawals, 10,000 here, 20,000 there. that he'd brush off as business expenses. Meetings he wouldn't explain, trips where he'd leave his location off. Vanessa told herself it was work stress, new investors, expansion plans, all the things he'd mention in passing before kissing her forehead and changing the subject. Being pregnant made her vulnerable in ways she hated. She needed him now. For insurance, for the babies, for the life she'd built that felt too fragile to risk questioning. So she stayed quiet, swallowed her doubts, chose peace over truth. But her body knew what her mind refused to accept. Preston started using touch as distraction. When she'd ask about the locked office, he'd pull her close, hands sliding under her shirt, lips finding that spot on her neck that made her forget questions. When she'd mention the weird cash withdrawals, he'd kiss away her concerns, fingers possessive on her pregnant body. She'd respond because part of her still wanted to believe. But afterward, lying next to him while he slept, she'd stare at the ceiling, counting all the things that didn't add up. Something felt different now. Less connection, more control, like he was playing a role instead of being a husband. Have you ever known something was wrong but convinced yourself otherwise? What made you finally trust your instincts? Share your story. The morning she found a second phone charger in his car, a model he didn't own. Vanessa made a choice that would change everything. She'd look. She'd finally look. Some truths aren't meant to be found. This one would cost her everything. The garage smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Her reflection stared back from the Tesla's black paint, distorted, swollen, afraid. The phone felt heavier than it should, like holding evidence of a crime not yet named. Preston left his Tesla unlocked that night. Arrogance, Vanessa would realize later. He never thought she'd look, never thought his quiet wife from Houston would have the nerve to invade his privacy. But she did. Her pregnant body made bending down difficult. She braced herself against the car door, one hand on her belly, the other reaching under the driver's seat. Her fingers found it, smooth glass, cold metal, hidden where he thought she'd never think to search. The phone had no password. Another arrogance, another mistake. While she scrolled through it, memory hit her hard. 6 months ago in this same car, Preston pulling her onto his lap in the driver's seat. Both of them laughing between kisses, her dress hiked up, his hands everywhere. The passion had felt real then. The love had felt true. Now, holding his secrets in the same space where they'd been intimate, the contrast made her stomach turn. Would you look? Or would you walk away and protect your peace? Tell me honestly, what would you do? The first email opened. $12 million transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands. The second, coordinates to a warehouse in El Paso. The third, a photo of girls, teenagers, faces blurred but terror clear. Vanessa's hands stopped shaking. They went numb. She expected affairs. She found human trafficking. Each screenshot lit up her face in the dark garage. Blue light revealing transactions that funded nightmares, emails that destroyed lives. Her daughters kicked inside her as if sensing their mother's racing heart. "I'm sorry," she whispered to them, "but I can't let this continue." $340 million. That's what she counted across 3 years of offshore accounts. Money moved through shell companies with names that meant nothing. Delaware LLCs, Cayman corporations, Swiss banks. The emails were worse. Encrypted messages with names she recognized from news reports. Known criminals, suspected traffickers. People the FBI had been hunting for years. And Preston, her husband, the father of her unborn daughters, was their banker. Photos of properties linked to border towns: El Paso, San Diego, Tijuana. Messages arranging shipments and deliveries that she knew weren't talking about products. They were talking about people, girls, women. Lives bought and sold like cattle. His tech startup was a front. All of it, the conferences, the investor meetings, the expansion plans, was money laundering. Blood money cleaned through legitimate business until it looked respectable. Vanessa's hands moved on autopilot. Screenshot, send, screenshot, send. Her twin brothers, Jake at the FBI, Ryan at Treasury, would know what to do with this. She remembered Preston's hands on her body, the way he'd worshipped her pregnancy, called her his queen. Those same hands were revealed as blood-stained. The violation felt more intimate than physical betrayal. He'd made love to her while funding atrocities. What's worse, physical betrayal or moral betrayal? When someone you love is revealed as a monster, which wounds deeper? Let me know below. The garage door opened. Preston's footsteps echoed on concrete. Vanessa looked up from the bathroom floor where she'd collapsed, phone still in her shaking hands. Their eyes met. His face changed, every mask falling away. "What did you do?" he whispered. Then he moved toward her, and she knew. She wouldn't walk out of this room. Love died in 60 minutes. So did the man she thought she knew. The bathroom tile was cold against her cheek. Blood pooled warm beneath her head, mixing with her tears. Above her, Preston's voice sounded far away, distorted, like speaking underwater. "You ruined everything," he kept saying. But through the pain, one thought burned clear. She'd already won. He'd found her on the bathroom floor, phone in hand, evidence screenshots already sent to Jake and Ryan. Preston grabbed her phone, saw the sent messages, and his face transformed from the man she'd loved for 7 years into something unrecognizable. The beating lasted an hour. Fists to her face, her ribs, her back. Kicks when she curled up trying to protect her belly. Calculated violence from a man who'd once held her like she was precious. Every punch felt like a betrayal, deeper than the trafficking, deeper than the lies. Her skull fractured. She felt it. The moment bone gave way, the moment consciousness started slipping. Inside her, the twins moved frantically, their heartbeats racing against hers. This bathroom where he'd bathed her pregnant body weeks ago, where he'd knelt and kissed her belly, where they'd been intimate countless times. Now it was a crime scene. The sanctuary transformed into hell. Vanessa's survival instinct focused on one thing: protecting her daughters. She covered her belly even as his fists rained down, even as blood filled her mouth, even as the world went dark around the edges. Her final thought before unconsciousness: I sent it. They know. Domestic violence destroys lives every day. If this story touches you, if you've survived or know someone who has, drop a below. You're not alone. As darkness claimed her, Vanessa's phone buzzed in Preston's hand. A text from Jake. "Got it. Already tracing. Stay safe." Preston's face went white. He'd silenced his wife. But he'd awakened something far more dangerous. Federal agents with evidence, a vendetta, and 24 hours to destroy him. He beat the wrong woman. Her brothers weren't just protective, they were weapons. In Washington, Jake's screens glowed with data streams, money flowing like blood through digital veins. In New York, Ryan's whiteboard mapped connections that would take down an empire. Neither slept. Both knew their sister lay dying, but she'd handed them the kill shot. Jake Mitchell worked cybersecurity for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Ryan Mitchell consulted for Treasury's money laundering division. When Vanessa's screenshots hit their phones at 11:47 p.m., they didn't call each other first. They called their teams. Jake's fingers flew across his keyboard, tracing IP addresses through offshore servers, following digital breadcrumbs through encrypted networks. Each account Preston touched left a fingerprint. Each transaction told a story. Within 2 hours, Jake had mapped $340 million, flowing through 47 accounts across 12 countries. In New York, Ryan built the financial architecture. Shell companies in Delaware. Fake investors in Switzerland. Wire transfers disguised as venture capital. 200 companies that existed only on paper, all leading back to one man, Preston Gallagher. The twins worked in parallel, connected by shared rage and professional training. Their sister, the girl who'd served cocktails to pay for school, who'd believed in fairy tales, who was carrying babies they'd already loved, lay broken because she'd done the right thing. Jake's wife found him at 3 a.m., still working, eyes red from staring at screens. She touched his shoulder, tried to pull him toward bed, toward comfort. He couldn't. His body was there, but his mind was with Vanessa, building the case that would bury the man who'd hurt her. Ryan sat alone in his Manhattan apartment, grief making everything numb. He'd had a date that night, canceled it the moment Vanessa's message came through. Now he stared at financial charts while his phone buzzed with texts he couldn't answer. By sunrise, they'd connected Preston to something bigger than they'd thought possible. The Ghost Network, a trafficking operation Interpol had hunted for 5 years. Routes from Texas border towns to wealthy clients nationwide. Victims moved like cargo. Money laundered through legitimate businesses. Have you ever had someone fight for you when you couldn't fight for yourself? Tag that person below. They deserve recognition. The phone rang at 6:14 a.m. Homeland Security. We're ready to move. While she fought for her life, federal agents built her case. Machines beeped rhythms of life. Oxygen, heartbeat, 2 smaller heartbeats struggling inside her broken body. Through the ICU window, Jake watched his sister's chest rise and fall artificially while his phone lit up with warrant confirmations. Justice and grief, measured in the same antiseptic light. Vanessa's skull fracture required surgery. Doctors drilled holes to relieve pressure, stitched scalp tissue, monitored brain swelling. Her twins, Grace and Hope, names no one said aloud yet, fought inside her damaged body. Preston never came. His lawyer called the hospital claiming client confidentiality prevented visits. Translation: he was building his defense while his wife lay dying. The ICU became command center. Jake and Ryan coordinated raids from the waiting room, speaking in hushed tones while machines kept their sister alive. Federal agents needed details only Vanessa could provide, but she couldn't speak. So her brothers filled gaps, answered questions, provided context. Nurses whispered about what they'd documented during admission, evidence of intimacy from days before the assault. The medical report would note consensual sexual activity followed by brutal violence. Her body told 2 stories, love and destruction, separated by hours. One nurse, an older woman with kind eyes, told Jake privately, "We see this too often. Domestic violence. Women beaten by men who claim to love them. Your sister's strong. She's fighting." Jake nodded, couldn't speak past the anger choking him. Day 2. Vanessa's vitals remained stable, but she didn't wake. Doctors said coma was her brain protecting itself. Give her time. Let her heal. Day 3. Alarms screamed. Doctors rushed in, Vanessa's vitals crashing. The twins were in distress. Emergency C-section necessary. Now. Medical professionals see the worst of humanity. If you work in healthcare and have witnessed domestic violence, your strength is remarkable. Comment below. Jake's phone buzzed while surgical teams prepped his unconscious sister. Text from his supervisor. Federal raids confirmed for 2 hours from now. 5 states. Simultaneous takedowns. His nieces would be born into a world where their father was already falling. 2 daughters died. An empire fell. Both happened in the same hour. The surgical team worked in terrible silence. 2 tiny bodies that never took breath, still attached to their unconscious mother by cords that couldn't save them. In the waiting room, Jake held his phone. Live feed of Preston Gallagher. Hands cuffed behind designer suit, led past shouting reporters. Birth and death, freedom and imprisonment. Occurring in the same brutal minute. Grace arrived first at 10:23 a.m. 1 pound, 14 ounces, no heartbeat. Doctors tried resuscitation, chest compressions on a body smaller than their hands. Nothing. Hope followed at 10:26 a.m. 2 pounds exactly. Same result, same terrible silence. Jake held his nieces while his sister lay unconscious 10 feet away. Their bodies were perfect. Tiny fingers, closed eyes, faces that looked like Vanessa. They died from trauma, from violence, from a father who'd chosen evil over family. At that exact moment, federal agents stormed Preston's office during a board meeting. Cameras captured everything, the billionaire CEO's face going white, his lawyer's protests, handcuffs clicking into place, his empire crumbling in real time. Raids happened simultaneously across 5 states. El Paso warehouse, 23 women freed. San Diego property, 14 more. Tijuana connection, Mexican authorities coordinating arrests. Preston's entire network exposed, dismantled, destroyed. Media went crazy. Breaking news. Tech billionaire arrested in trafficking conspiracy. Headlines everywhere. Preston's perp walk played on loop. Designer suit, expensive haircut, dead eyes. Medical examiner noted the twins were healthy until their mother's trauma. The pregnancy that resulted from love destroyed by violence. Vanessa's body, once site of creation and intimacy, now crime scene and graveyard. Some losses are unbearable. If you've experienced pregnancy loss or know someone who has, this moment is for them. Share their name below if they'd want to be remembered. Day 5. Vanessa opened her eyes. The first face she saw was Jake's. The first words she heard, "He's in custody." But Nessa, his voice broke. She looked down at her deflated belly and knew before he said it. Her scream was silent, a mother's grief too vast for sound. She saved countless lives, but couldn't save her own daughters. Hospital windows framed Austin's sunset, gold and crimson, beautiful and indifferent. Vanessa's hands rested on her empty belly, tracing where daughters once kicked. The TV across the room showed Preston's mugshot on loop. "He killed them," she whispered. Jake gripped her hand. "We'll make sure he pays for everything." Doctors explained her injuries in clinical terms. Skull fracture requiring surgery. Internal trauma from repeated blows. Brain swelling that caused the coma. Medical intervention came too late for the twins. Stress hormones from the assault triggered early labor. But their bodies weren't ready. They never had a chance. Jake and Ryan sat on either side of her hospital bed, explaining what happened while she slept. Preston's arrest, the federal raids, 47 women freed in the first wave. His $340 million empire seized, frozen, scheduled for forfeiture. "You did this," Ryan said quietly. "Your evidence broke the case wide open. 5 years federal agents hunted this network. You handed them everything. Vanessa stared at her hands, the same hands that had held Preston's hidden phone, taken screenshots, sent evidence to her brothers. The same hands that would never hold her daughters. News coverage played constantly. Her story, Billionaire's Wife Exposes Trafficking Network, became national headline. Reporters camped outside the hospital. Everyone wanted interviews, statements, details. FBI victim advocate arrived with documents. Preston's network spanned 8 years. Hundreds of victims across 3 countries. Routes carefully mapped. Clients meticulously documented. Money trails leading to politicians, businessmen, criminals. Vanessa's phone had contained the key to everything. Nurses helped her shower 3 days after waking. She saw her body in the mirror, bruises shaped like his hands on her thighs, arms, belly. Places he once touched with desire, now marked by rage. Her stomach, once swollen with life, now empty and scarred. The intimacy of pregnancy stolen by violence. The violation deeper than physical. He'd destroyed not just her body, but her future, her children, her trust in love itself. Survivors of violence, your strength is immeasurable. If you found justice or are still fighting for it, tell your story below. Someone needs to hear it. The FBI victim advocate arrived with documents. Preston's trafficking network spanned 8 years, hundreds of victims. Vanessa's evidence had freed 47 women in the first raids. You saved them, the advocate said. Vanessa stared at her daughter's footprints, ink on paper, the only proof they existed. Then let's save more, she answered. Grief became fuel. Trauma became testimony. Conference room transformed into war room. Whiteboards covered in timelines, photos, financial charts. Vanessa sat center, hospital gown replaced by borrowed clothes, head bandaged but eyes sharp. He talked about expansion in March 2023, she said, pointing to a gap in prosecution's timeline. That's when the El Paso warehouse opened. Federal prosecutors worked from Vanessa's hospital bed for 2 weeks. Her deposition lasted 7 days, every detail of their 7-year marriage documented. When did his behavior change? February 2022. When did she first notice locked doors? April 2022. When did unexplained cash withdrawals begin? June 2022. Preston's trafficking network stretched further than anyone knew. Routes from Texas through California into Nevada. Clients in 12 states. Victims from Mexico, Central America, Eastern Europe. Money moved through banks in Switzerland, Cayman Islands, Panama. Other victims came forward. Women freed in the raids, survivors who'd escaped years ago. Each testimony added weight to the case. Each story confirmed what Vanessa's evidence had revealed. Preston wasn't just laundering money, he was part of the operation. Prosecutors treated Vanessa with respect that surprised her. They saw her intelligence, her clarity through pain, her determination to see this through. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was their strongest witness. Preston's lawyers tried intimidation, restraining orders filed claiming Vanessa posed a threat. Motions to suppress evidence, claiming illegal search. Every legal trick to discredit her, silence her, make her go away. She refused. The psychological violation cut deeper than physical. Preston had made love to her while planning atrocities. Every intimate moment recontextualized as manipulation. Every touch revealed as calculated. Every whispered promise exposed as lies. Prosecutors asked about their physical relationship for timeline confirmation. When did intimacy change? Did he ever hurt you before? Did you notice anything different? Vanessa answered clinically, dissociating to survive each question. When did you realize someone you trusted was playing a role? How did you reclaim your story? Share your moment of clarity. The prosecution's closing statement. Mrs. Gallagher's courage gave us everything. Offshore accounts, client lists, warehouse locations, communication records. Without her, this network would still be operating. Vanessa watched through video link from Safe House as Preston's lawyer stood to cross-examine. His opening question made her blood freeze. Isn't it true you benefited financially from your husband's crimes for 7 years? They tried to make her the villain. She became their reckoning. The courtroom felt like theater. Cameras prohibited, but artists sketching every moment. Gallery packed with reporters and survivors. Vanessa took the stand in simple black dress, wedding ring conspicuously absent. Preston stared at her across the room. The man who'd loved and destroyed her, his eyes empty of everything but calculation. Preston's defense strategy was clear from opening statements. Paint Vanessa as complicit. A woman who'd enjoyed 7 years of luxury funded by crimes she had to know about. A scorned wife seeking revenge through false accusations. His lawyer circled like a shark during cross-examination. Mrs. Gallagher, you lived in a multi-million-dollar penthouse for 7 years, correct? Yes. You traveled on private jets, wore designer clothes, ate at exclusive restaurants. Yes. And you expect this jury to believe you had no idea where that money came from. Vanessa's voice stayed steady. I believed my husband ran a legitimate tech company. I was wrong. The lawyer pushed harder, trying to shame her working-class background, suggesting she'd seen Preston as a meal ticket, using the word gold digger without actually saying it. Did you enjoy the lifestyle his money provided? The penthouse? The cars? The vacations? Vanessa's response cut through the courtroom. I enjoyed believing my husband was a good man. That wasn't purchased. That was stolen. Public opinion split down the middle. Some saw her as hero. Others questioned why she hadn't known sooner, hadn't left sooner, hadn't acted sooner. Victim blaming dressed up as legitimate questions. Character witnesses testified on her behalf. Former employers describing her work ethic. Community members who'd known her family for decades. Her parents, holding hands in the front row, their pride visible despite their tears. Preston sat silent through most of the trial. His mask fully removed now, arrogant, cold, unrepentant. When prosecutors showed evidence of his crimes, he barely reacted. When they described victims, his face showed nothing. The defense's attempt to embarrass Vanessa about intimate details backfired. Jurors saw through the tactic. A desperate play to discredit a woman who'd survived hell. Have you ever been blamed for someone else's crimes? Shamed for trusting the wrong person? Drop your truth below. Victim blaming ends here. Prosecution's final witness changed everything. A trafficking survivor, Preston's network had moved 5 years ago. She was 17 then, 32 now. She looked directly at Preston. He came to the warehouse once, inspected us like cattle. The courtroom exploded. Preston's lawyer scrambled, and Vanessa finally exhaled. They believed her. Justice took 2 hours of deliberation. Healing would take a lifetime. The word guilty echoed 12 times, once for each juror, each count, each year of horror. Preston's shoulders slumped as if strings were cut. Vanessa didn't smile or cry. She simply stood when the judge announced sentencing, placed her hand over her empty belly, and whispered names only she could hear. Grace. Hope. We won. Jury deliberation lasted exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes. Fast for a case this complex. But the evidence was overwhelming. Guilty on all counts. money laundering, conspiracy to commit human trafficking, attempted murder. Each verdict read aloud, each one another nail in Preston's coffin. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Life without parole plus 50 years. The judge's words were cutting. You exploited the vulnerable for profit. You betrayed your wife and unborn children. You deserve no mercy because you showed none. $340 million seized. Every account frozen, every asset liquidated. The money would go to Victims Fund. Helping survivors rebuild lives Preston had tried to destroy. Preston's empire dismantled piece by piece, his company dissolved, board members resigning, investors fleeing, everything he'd built crumbling to dust. Jake and Ryan sat behind Vanessa throughout sentencing. Their mission accomplished, their sister vindicated. Justice served, even though it couldn't return what they'd lost. Preston tried to speak before being led away, attempted one final blame shift toward Vanessa. The judge silenced him immediately. You've said enough. Take him away. Vanessa watched Preston led away in chains. This man who'd known her body intimately, now a stranger. The finality of separation. Physical, legal, emotional. Her body would never be touched by him again, never carry his children again, never confuse love with danger again. Does justice feel like victory when you've lost everything? Or is it just closing a door you wished never opened? Share your perspective on justice versus healing. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. One question cut through the noise. What's next for you, Mrs. Gallagher? Vanessa paused, turned, looked directly into the camera. Her answer would shock everyone watching, including herself. I'm not Mrs. Gallagher anymore. I'm Vanessa Rodriguez, and I'm not finished. She lost her daughters, her marriage, her fairy tale. She reclaimed her power. The Houston apartment was small, nothing like the penthouse she'd left. Mismatched furniture, street noise filtering through thin walls, no view of skylines or sunsets. But when Vanessa unpacked the box containing her daughter's footprints and placed them on the mantel, the space felt like home. Not someone else's vision, hers. Legal name change finalized 3 months after the trial. Vanessa Rodriguez, officially. The girl from Houston who'd briefly been someone else, now reclaiming the identity Preston had tried to erase. Divorce proceedings were simple, uncontested. Preston signed papers from prison without argument. 7 years of marriage dissolved with a judge's signature. Financial settlement could have made her wealthy. Preston's remaining personal assets, separate from seized criminal proceeds, totaled millions. Vanessa's lawyer urged her to take it. You're entitled to this. You earned it. She refused. Donated everything to trafficking survivor organizations. She wanted nothing that came from him, nothing that carried his name, nothing that reminded her of who she'd been when she believed his lies. Moving back to Houston felt like breathing again. Her parents' neighborhood, working class and real, welcomed her without judgment. People here knew struggle. They understood starting over. Trauma therapy twice weekly. Physical rehabilitation for lingering effects from her injuries. Slowly rebuilding herself from pieces Preston had tried to destroy. Vanessa alone for the first time in years, relearning her body post-trauma. Scars that mark her survival. The absence of touch, both violent and intimate, leaving her in limbo. Her therapist asking, "When do you think you'll be ready to be vulnerable again?" Vanessa's answer, "I'm vulnerable now. That's different than available." Her parents visited constantly, brought food, helped organize the apartment, sat with her during hard nights when grief felt impossible to carry. Their unconditional support reminded her that love existed without conditions, without violence, without lies. Starting over takes more courage than enduring sometimes. If you've rebuilt your life from nothing, share what that first step looked like. 6 months after the trial, Jake called with news. Trafficking Survivors Organization wanted Vanessa to speak at their annual conference. Tell your story. Help others tell theirs. She'd spent 7 years being silent, 4 months being scrutinized. Maybe it was time to control her own narrative. "Send me the details," she said. "I'll be there." Her silence nearly killed her. Her voice would save others. The conference hall held 300 survivors, women who'd clawed their way back from hell. When Vanessa stepped to the microphone, her voice shook, not from fear, but from recognition. She'd found her people. "I thought my story was unique," she began. "But looking at your faces, I see echoes of my pain and reflections of my strength." Speaking publicly for the first time on her terms felt like freedom. No lawyers controlling her words, no defense attorneys twisting her meaning, no media editing for headlines. Just truth, raw and unfiltered. She shared everything. Meeting Preston, the fairy tale romance, 7 years of marriage, the hidden phone, the evidence, the beating. Losing grace and hope, the trial, rebuilding from nothing. 300 survivors listened in silence. When she finished, the room erupted, not in applause, but in recognition. These women knew. They understood. Vanessa mentioned in her speech the complexity of loving someone revealed as monster. "He was gentle with my body while destroying others." That cognitive dissonance, that he could be both, is something I'm still processing. Several survivors nodding, understanding that abuse and affection can coexist, making escape harder. Media coverage framed her differently now. Not victim, not wife of criminal, but advocate, survivor, voice for the voiceless. Federal agencies reached out. Offers to consult on training programs teaching law enforcement to recognize trafficking indicators. Her experience, seeing nothing until she looked. Ignoring red flags, believing lies, made her perfect to teach others what to watch for. She found purpose beyond justice, prevention, support, making sure other women didn't have to lose everything before finding truth. Vanessa recognized her privilege in this space. Wealthy white woman got media attention, got believed, got justice faster than women of color, immigrant women, poor women. She used that visibility to amplify voices that typically went unheard. If you've ever turned your pain into purpose, your trauma into testimony, share what you're fighting for now. Your mission matters. After her speech, a woman approached, late 20s, scarred but standing tall. "I was one of the 47 your evidence freed," she said. Vanessa's breath caught. "I wanted to thank you and ask, what do we do now? How do we live after surviving?" Vanessa didn't have an answer yet, but she was about to find one. 2 daughters never breathed. Hundreds of lives were saved. This is how grief becomes grace. The community center in Houston glowed with purpose. Walls covered in survivors' artwork, resources stacked on tables, hope-filling spaces where despair once lived. Above the entrance, the Grace and Hope Foundation, where survival becomes strength. Vanessa cut the ribbon as her parents cried proud tears, Jake and Ryan flanking her like honor guard. The Grace and Hope Foundation, named for twin daughters who never took their first breath, but whose legacy would save hundreds. Mission statement clear: supporting trafficking survivors and training people to recognize warning signs. Prevention and healing. Justice and hope. Funding came from unexpected places. Book deal. Vanessa's story published, proceeds donated to the foundation. Speaking fees from conferences nationwide. Corporate partnerships with companies committed to fighting trafficking. Jake and Ryan served on the board, bringing federal expertise. Her parents volunteered daily, greeting survivors with warmth and zero judgment. The foundation became family business. Healing built on shared pain. First anniversary of Grace and Hope's death became foundation launch. Memorial service that morning. Just family, flowers, 2 tiny graves that held Vanessa's heart. Then ribbon cutting that afternoon, transforming private grief into public good. Vanessa's complete transformation visible to everyone. Victim to survivor, to advocate to leader. Each step forward honoring daughters who never got to walk. She accepted that healing wasn't linear or complete. Some days grief overwhelmed everything. Other days purpose carried her through. Both were valid. Both were necessary. Vanessa reflecting on her body's journey. From love to pregnancy to violence to emptiness to advocacy. My body was a battleground, she tells a group of survivors in a workshop. Now it's a testament. Every scar, every loss, every moment I choose to stand here. It's proof that they didn't win. We did. What would you name your legacy? If your pain had to mean something, what would you build? Comment below. Your vision matters. Vanessa Rodriguez lost everything checking her husband's phone, her daughters, her marriage, her innocence. But she gained something Preston Gallagher's billions could never buy. The power to dismantle the system that nearly destroyed her and save lives he'd tried to commodify. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more true stories of survival, justice, and transformation. Tell me in the comments, what aspect of Vanessa's journey resonated most? And remember, sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is tell the truth. But it's also the most powerful. She waited at the foundation office late one evening, organizing files for new clients. Through the window, she saw her reflection. No longer the frightened woman holding a hidden phone in a dark garage, but someone stronger. Someone who'd survived hell and built heaven from the ashes. Grace and Hope would never take their first breaths. But their legacy would breathe life into hundreds. And that, Vanessa realized, was how love won after all.